to go live. Okay, the computer says we're live, so we're live. All right. Hello, everyone. Jacob and HP Hollow here tonight with Christopher Ruocchio. Rocchio, right? Did I butcher the pronunciation? Okay. I'm going to pronounce it a different way every single time I say it, so I apologize in advance. I try to memorize it, and then I forget almost as soon as I get it in my brain. And so, yes.
No worries at all.
You got it pretty well there.
We are here tonight for the virtual launch party for Time Troopers, which Christopher co-edited and Jacob has a story in.
Yes.
So in a bit, I'm going to have Christopher introduce himself fully because he's done some other cool anthologies and other cool novels as well. For those who are new, and I think we're streaming to a few new places tonight. We're on a bunch of Bane channels. Every time we do a virtual launch party, Jacob and I will give away signed copies of the book we're promoting. And so we're doing 2 different contests as usual. Let me get my little banner up so you can read along with me. Let's see, show. All right. So there's going to be a form on depending upon where you're watching, on Facebook and YouTube and whatnot, on our Hollow Writing pages. It's going to be in the description. Contest number 1 is going to be, you can enter to win a signed copy of Time Troopers. So just put your info in that form. We'll select a random winner after the stream. All good. If you have already ordered Time Troopers, yay, thank you so much. Please write a review. But also, you can leave your confirmation number or some kind of proof that you own the book, and you will be entered to win instead a signed copy of the Gordian Protocol, which is Jacob and David Weber's new-ish time travel series. The first book.
The first in our.
It's the first. Yeah. You've written like 5 books at this point, right?
2 have been published.
2 have been published.
The 3rd one comes out in October.
Okay.
The 4th one's been turned into the publisher. The 5th one is on David's desk right now.
All right. So, and I will say too, let me get back to my comments page. So many pages. Hey, Derek. I will say that if you're watching on any of the Bane pages, specifically Twitter and Facebook, I believe, if you somehow find that any of your comments aren't making it through to me, this is also being streamed on the Hollow Writing YouTube, Hollow Writing Facebook page, and our Twitch. So if your comments aren't going through, comment there and they will definitely go through those pages. So just FYI. All right, let's see here. What is next on my little agenda? I don't think I have any more intro boring things. All right, so
did you want to give Christopher a chance to introduce himself?
Yes, that's what I was.
Okay.
All right, next. Since we have a guest, I'm going to let the guest introduce himself. And so, Christopher, have at it.
Oh, hey everyone, I'm Christopher Ruocchio. I mostly write the Sun Eater science fantasy series over for Doll Books, but I used to be, for 7 years, the junior editor over at Bane. And while I was there, I edited, I think, 8 anthologies total, the last of which is not out yet. This was the second to last one, co-edited with Hank Davis, who's been working with Bane since time immemorial. And he kind of, taught me how to do these anthologies in the first place, really. And Time Troopers was sort of the last one we did together. And it is a collection mostly of reprinted time travel stories that have kind of a military bent to them. So we've got, there's a Heinlein story in there. There's like an old Fritz Leiber story. Mostly, as I say, it's mostly reprints. But there are a couple original stories, Jacob's Dr. Sleep being one of them. I've also got a story in the collection as well, the Arcana, which ties into my Sun Eater books. So it was just sort of it was probably my favorite part of the job, honestly, was putting these things together, getting especially to dig through these old stories. I can't remember if there was one in this collection or not that had never been reprinted, but we would frequently find some pretty obscure stuff and get to reprint it for the first time, which is really cool. And to run stories like that alongside, classics, Heinlein's All You Zombies is in this book, is really fun. It's really fun to go, digging through the annals of science fiction history to put these things together. A little bit of time travel in and of itself. And no, I'm really happy with how the collection came on out. So if you, like short stories. Oh, go ahead.
Before we continue, I gotta say to all the viewers, like, Christopher is not gonna say this about himself because he's modest, but the Sun Eater series, for real, is like single-handedly one of the best sci-fi novels I've read in my life, or I've only read the first one. It's one of the best sci-fi novels I've read in my life. So if you have not read the Sun Eater series, go do it. Maybe not right now, but like right after this stream, right after you read Time Troopers. Okay, so sorry, I had to fangirl for a moment. Like, for real. I could be a lot more ridiculous about this, but I'm
All right. You're holding yourself back.
Yes. Hi, Sean. We see you.
Well, thank you.
We see you in the comments. All right. So,
Oh, hey, man.
first question on my little list of questions here. What led to the creation of the Time Troopers anthology specifically? Like, why time travel?
So Hank had this list. I think about 2 years into working at Band, Hank got very sick for a bit. He got better, thank God. And after he did that, I had to sort of pick up one of the anthologies he was working on when he got ill and wrap things up. And after that, I sort of stuck around as his understudy and helped put these things together. But Hank had the tables of contents for 4 or 5 different anthologies he wanted to do. And my role was sort of to enable him. And so I would go around, he'd have maybe, 30, 40 stories. You need usually like 12 to 15 to make a anthology. And so I would go around and I would talk to the agents, or I would figure out who owns, controls the estate for whichever, writer, because a lot of them are no longer with us. And so there is a little bit of, forensic work figuring out either which agent represented who were, whose great grandson was, nominally in charge of the estate or whatever. And so there'd be a little work there. Some stories you couldn't get because we couldn't figure out who to talk to, right? And so the list would sort of pare themselves down. But as far as the concept for this one, when I started working with Hank, he had this list. We did Space Pioneers, which was the first one we did together, and that was about pioneering stories, space colonization, that sort of thing. Then we did Overruled, which was courtroom stories, right? Be that, with maybe a robot lawyer or an alien judge or whatever, right? And then we did Cosmic Corsairs, which was space pirates, and then Time Troopers. And he had one more. The last one, sorry, he didn't. The last one I'm doing is all me. There's so many I get confused. That one, just for the sake of posterity, is about ancient aliens and archaeologists. But that's a different book. Anyway, so this one was on his list, and I think he had a couple more that my replacement Sean, who I think's in the chat, is going to take over with him. So Hank's just had a bunch of these sort of concepts for anthologies brewing, and he's done more than a dozen others for Bane over the years, right? He's done a Christmas book, he's done one about kaiju, he's done one he's in horror stories, he's done romance stories, he's done all sorts of things, because Bane likes to keep these short story anthologies going. They like to keep a lot of these stories in print generally. Tony Weisskopf is publisher at Bane, right? Sort of feels like it's a sort of cultural responsibility to keep some of these stories in circulation. That's part of the reason too why it's so cool to dig up stories. There's a story in this book I just remembered called "Remember the Alamo" by a guy called T.R. Fehrenbach, who was a historian and didn't write, I think, but the 1 or 2 sci-fi stories ever. So Hank just remembered this obscure story from, I think it was in Analog in the 50s or something, and he went and dug it up. And as I say, that's the really, really cool sort of part of doing this. So he had, a sense of what he wanted and a sense of, what the book should be, at a thematic level. And really my job was just to make sure the legal paperwork got sorted out, authors got paid and things like that. So
I'm curious, who were some of the authors or stories that you were unable to get, that you couldn't find contact information for or estate information?
The 2 that come to mind for this book is there was an Aldous Budrus story we wanted to get, and negotiations broke down on that one. And Ray Bradbury we wanted to get, but it's just a little bit difficult to get that deal to close too, because there are other factors too. Some of those are being, financial ones, right? Some stories, some authors are more expensive than others. You can't negotiate things like that. So there's there's still a business aspect to how these things go when you're putting them together. And of course, when that happens, we'll say, well, we'll just get some new writers and get them to, bring, new voices. No. Jacob,
You've
I'm
already
saying
covered
you're
a.
Bradbury, so
Yeah, that's a bummer that you couldn't get him. I love Ray Bradbury. I think there's not a science fiction writer alive who doesn't like Ray Bradbury. It's like almost a travesty to not like Ray Bradbury.
oh yeah,
All right.
no.
My next question. My next question, I think you've answered a little bit already. It was, how did you select the authors or works you wanted to include in this anthology? Did you have anything you wanted to add there? Any sort of deeper
No,
look?
not really. It was really all Hank. You know, Hank has this incredible sort of photographic memory for the short fiction in science fiction up until really about like the 60s. You know, as he was growing up in the 40s and 50s, and you could ask Hank, what was the lead story in Analog in like 58, and he could tell you, right? And it's really cool. And he would tell you exactly where it was in the office too. He'd go find the book that it was collected in, right? And so he would sit down and he'd think, there was a story about the Alamo, right? And it was sometime in like 54. I'll go find it, right? And so he really knew what he wanted, from the beginning. And it's really cool because back in the day, right, it used to be possible to read everything that was published in science fiction. That is not true anymore, right? Even if you were only to read traditionally published stuff, you would struggle to keep up because there's so much more of it by volume than was being published back in the day. And
That's one of the worst things.
No, you're good.
I was going to say that's one of the worst things too about having a bunch of author friends. It's like I want to keep up with the books that everyone I know has written, but there's not enough time in the world.
I've already
to do that and write my own stuff and edit your stuff.
Yeah,
and it's like
exactly, especially if you're writing yourself. I always feel like a jerk when I do these things. People ask me, have you read X or Y? And the answer is usually no. It was doubly bad when I was working at Bain still because I had to read for work, right? So the last thing I wanted to do for fun was read more. I was kind of burned out by the end of the day between that and my own writing, and I was gonna go play video games or something. It's hard to keep up. And,
oh, this could easily turn into a video game stream.
We're not going to get off topic.
We'll refrain from that.
Talk about with the anthology.
All right. Next question is partly from my own curiosity because anthologies are something I have no experience with in terms of publishing and writing and whatnot. So what is the general process of editing an anthology?
So you start with that list, right? Or whether that's a list of stories you want to reprint or authors you'd like to include, right? And you want to make sure that you've got some big names, some familiar names, so that people will pick up a book on the strength of that name. This is especially true when you're writing new anthologies. You want to get a couple really high-profile writers because people will buy the book, say, because they want to read a David Weber story or they want to read let's say George R. R. Martin or something like that. But they might not buy the book, on the strength of, say, my name, right? So you want those sort of anchor authors to sort of build the anthology around. And so when you're doing mostly a reprint anthology like this, you've got those names and you probably have the famous stories in mind too, right? Like I said, we've got All You Zombies, which some people say isn't, it's not really a military story, but that was the one Hank wanted. But we knew we wanted that, and that's like I said, it's a very famous story. So we kind of built around that, and then you work down through sort of mid-list writers, and then you get some new names in there as well. Because the theory is that someone will buy the book because they want to read Heinlein, they want to read Leiber, or like I said Martin or whoever, right? But they will maybe read the whole book since they have not purchased it, and they will find new writers that way. And so you try to build with that intent, right? And you might not get everyone you're looking for, so you've got some, you've got some alternates and things like that as well. And you just work sort of down the list until you've got enough material to fill out a book. So, you want to get about 100,000, 120,000 words of material. Once you've gotten there, then the book is pretty much done. And there are a couple exceptions. This one ran a bit longer because there's an H. Beam Piper novel, technically. It's about 40,000 words in the back. And I just lost the name of the story. but there's an H.P. Piper novel in the back, and so this one ran a little bit long for that reason. But you sort of go from there, and
it really is.
yeah, it's Time Crime. That's the one. And so there are a couple novelettes in there as well. My favorite story in the collection is Poul Anderson's Delenda Est, which is about Rome falling apart and the future becoming quite Celtic. And Poul Anderson's just a tremendous writer, and so I really enjoy that story. And of course, I'm a big Roman guy. As much as it pains me to see them lose to the Celts, it's still a good story. And so you do that, right? You've got your wish list, and you work down from there. Sometimes it doesn't work out, and you build a story around that. Once you have the stories, then you want to sit down and think about, like, what's the right order to put these in. If you've got something that's really long, like that Piper story, you don't want to open with that, right? You kind of want to close with something that's going to be that much of an investment relative to the other stories. So we knew that we wanted that to go at the end, right? And you usually start with the story that you think most typifies the concept, right? And so you'll build your story list from there and figure out how you want things to go. And then usually Hank writes the intros and stuff because it's really his show. And like I said, I'm his understudy, right? But all you need to do once you have that order together is write story intros. Do your job as an editor, basically. Which with reprints, right? Like we're not editing Heinlein, right? Like that story is done. It doesn't need work. All we do really is say why it's here and, introduce the story a little bit. We're really more like curators than editors in a reprint anthology, really, right? Once that's done, the book is pretty much good to go. And when you're writing anthologies that are all original material, you will edit the stories that time because no one's seen them before. They're going to be misplaced commas and things like that. And it's not like the books aren't proofread either, right? One of the more nerve-wracking parts of the job is precisely when, maybe because of a scanning error or something, there is a new typo you've introduced into Heinlein, right? And so there are moments, where you have to go copy edit Heinlein, right? Which usually means you're looking at an older version of the story and being like, that comma should not be there. But you don't actually mess with the extant material, right? So that's basically does that make sense? I kind of meandered a bit, I think, but
how many stories in the anthology are classic versus newly written? Remember off the top of your head?
I think it's just the two. I think, Jacob, it's just you and me are original. I could double check that, but I think it's just us. Put it up for display, foolishly, so y'all. Oh no, Hank's got a story in there as well, and Sarah A. Hoyt has an original. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
So the four of us.
I've been staring at so many different books today.
But yeah, so the rest, H.P. Piper, Edmund Hamilton, T.R. Fehrenbach, Gene Wolfe, John C. Wright, Robert Silverberg, Fritz Leiber, A.E. Van Vogt. We finally got a Van Vogt story. Hank's been trying to get a Van Vogt story in one of these as long as I've known him. We finally got up with him, so that was a real big win.
What makes it difficult to get that name?
What's that?
Yeah, what makes it difficult to get that particular name?
To get Van Vogt, we just had a hard time getting up with his family. We had a hard time figuring out who to talk to. So we finally cracked the code on that one and got to work with his wife and his daughter, if memory serves, to get the story printed, which is really cool. Hank's a big Van Vogt fan, and finally being able to reprint Van Vogt's story for one of his books was a real feather in his cap, and I was happy to be a part of that. So.
I'm finding it really interesting how much investigative work goes into putting together an anthology like this. I guess, kind of looking at the process from the outside, I'm like, well, these, a lot of these are older stories. You just go to the shelf and grab them off the shelf, and it's like, oh, no, there's a lot more to it.
Yeah, it's not nearly that simple.
Yeah, it is that simple when it's public domain, but even finding out if a story is in public domain is really tricky. It's not like there's a central registry because the laws changed a few times. So if it falls in the wrong, window, it can be unclear, and so that can be a trick. And even when it is, we still try to buy the story, right? If we can find a grandchild or great grandchild, we still want them to get the money if we can. It's just the right thing to do, right? So there are factors. That whole aspect of it's kind of crazy, right? There were whole books that it was another thing I used to do when I worked at Bain a couple times, was try to find who owned the rights to these old books. I can't remember who the author was, but I ended up like contacting some Gaelic university in Ireland because they had the letters of this one writer, and you'd have to go digging through trying to find contact information for who gave the letters to the school, and it's the great grandson of this author, and it's cool. It's a side of publishing people don't think about, but it's really an important one in putting these things together. And like I say, there's almost a time travel-y thing to dealing with that too, right? Because you're dealing with these earlier epochs of the genre and stuff is really cool.
All right, so since you're here as our guest, tell us a bit about your story and how it ties into the Sun Eater universe.
Yeah, so my story is called The Arcana, right, which is like bad, the old sailor, right, and so there is no time travel, in the Sun Eater universe. It's not a time travel-y kind of series, but my rule in writing stories. What's that?
So I was wondering how it fit in that way, because I didn't recall there being time travel in the
there isn't.
anyway.
Yeah, it's not really the focus of it. It's sort of a classic, somewhere between space opera and the old, Sword and Planet kind of adventure stuff, right? And so I've had this rule in writing stories for my Bain anthologies that they all had to tie back in to the Sun Eater universe, so that I could, get my readers to read the stories that I was writing. And as I've written, helped compile like 8 of these, I went from sort of the bottom of the table of contents. I've moved up the list a little bit, which has been very gratifying. And so this story, I had to sort of figure out an idea, in like a puzzle solving kind of way, because how do we make a science fiction concept that's not really in the universe work in a story? And the answer is that there is time travel in regular physics, right? But it's in one direction. And so the story is about a ship that has arrived by special relativity in a imperial star system far in the future. And in the Sun Eater universe, everyone uses sort of QBA style warp drives, right? So they're not subject to special relativity. But of course, special relativity still works. It's a law of physics, right? And so they basically are invaded by the past, right? This old ship shows up that is time traveled from before there was warp drive, right? And so nobody uses this old, Einsteinian physics to get around, because it would, of course, you would age out Planet of the Apes style and never be able to go home. So why would you want to use it? But somebody did, and so the story is about what is the ship, who sent it, why, and for people who are already big Sun Eater fans, it will which God bless you, thank you. But it will be, I think, really gratifying to see a sort of aspect of the universe. I think some of my readers have been looking forward to see. It's almost a cameo in a sense, but I think that Sun Eater readers will really like it. But I really like the idea. It was a little bit more hard science fictional than a lot of the stuff I write, because of course the Sun Eater verges on epic fantasy, even in some places, right? They're just planets instead of kingdoms, and so to do something a little bit different and a little bit more grounded was a nice change as well. So it was really fun. I hope everybody likes it. So, and there's a fun little trick in there with language and linguistic drift as well, because of course they're coming from the past, so they don't speak quite the same, because it's been a few thousand years.
You do cool stuff with language anyway in Sun Eater, so that'll be a familiar thing for readers as well.
Yeah, I think it worked, but I can't remember. I think there was one review that was like, it was distracting. I'm like, well, I'll see what people think. It was an experiment, so
yeah.
Yeah, which is another cool thing about short stories, right? Because you get to try a lot of stuff that, you know, you might not have had a chance to in a novel, right? Or yet, right? So it's cool
That's
because I
always
think
a
I've
good
written,
thing about.
oh, sorry.
Oh, I was gonna say that is a good thing about short stories, because I remember you don't do it so much anymore, but back when you were first writing, you would always test out a new world by writing a short story set in that world
Yeah,
to
I
get a
would
feeling for
write
it.
like prototype stories
Yeah.
to get the feel for either, you know, a setting or a character, and, you know, try things out. And then once I had a certain comfort level with the, you know, the whatever I had designed, I would then proceed with
Mhm.
writing the novel.
It is also a fun, like they can be a fun challenge if you've already established your world, though, because I'm writing a short story now, potentially for an anthology. If it doesn't get accepted, I'll just publish it elsewhere. But I'm writing in a series that is already three tiny books deep, and I have what 6,000 to 10,000 words to work with, and trying to condense the craziness of the world I've created and into 10,000 words while also capturing the characters in the same way is a real challenge, because it's like I use a lot of words when I write, and so it is a challenge, but it's a fun challenge. So
Yeah, and
yeah.
it's a very different medium, right? Science
Mhm.
fiction used to be all about the short story back in the day, right?
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of these stories come from, right? It used to be like the prestige format for science fiction, and those days are really over. There are a couple of the old magazines still around, right? Anthology,
Mhm.
of course, you know, and a couple others, but most people, you know, they read novels, right? And the reading tastes have changed. But
That's one
you
of the
know,
things that I really
no, you're
break
good.
your
You
screen
go
for
ahead.
you. Okay. Sorry. Well, I was going to say that's one of the things I really appreciate about the fact that Bain continues to put out short story anthologies, because you're right. Short story as an art is kind of disappearing. And I feel like it would have been, it would have been, I lost my train of thought. I saw a comment and my brain just went, woo.
Oh,
I
I do
feel
that.
like Bain is almost single handedly keeping the short story tradition alive with all the anthologies it puts out. I mean, I know there are magazines and whatnot else there, but in terms of other sci-fi anthologies, I mean, the main ones I think of are the Bain ones. Um,
Yeah,
unless
Yeah,
I'm
I'm
not
mis-
aware of,
yeah.
you know,
I
a
can
lot
think
of
of a
others.
few others. Titan has done some, and you get some from the other mainstream houses occasionally. But Bain does seem to make, you know, something of a specialty of keeping the format around. And part of that is, like I said, you know, Tony has this sense that this is really an aspect of that heart of science fiction, right? You know, to use the old
Mhm.
Bain tagline. But it really is where the genre grew up. You know, it was the format that made science fiction, and so there is something about protecting that tradition of science fiction that is important to Tony, to Bain, and to me too. Right? I think that, you know, there. I was talking about this on a stream last night. Right? There are so many writers that nobody remembers anymore. Right? Even writers that you know you feel like people should remember, like Fritz Leiber. Right? Like most people, you know, who are maybe my age or even, especially even younger, never heard of the writers that like really made science fiction what it is. They may know Asimov, they may know Clark and Heinlein, but they probably don't know Van Vogt. They probably don't know Philip K. Dick, right? They certainly don't know, you know, some of the more obscure stuff like Fehrenbach in this one, right?
Mhm.
And so having a chance to sort of celebrate the traditions of the genre is one of the things that really
Right.
excites me about putting these collections together, because that matters, right? You know, it's our roots as artists, and you know, to forget about it and to forget about the short story generally is to like be a painter and forget about landscapes. Like it's like it's like a pretty big oversight if we don't keep doing short stories, even just as you know, you know, sort of the niche interest thing is, of course, you know, novels are where
Right.
the commercial interest is, right? But it's still cool to be able to do that, even if on a certain level it's only you know, for ourselves. I really enjoy writing short stories, which I
Mhm.
never thought I would. I thought, you know, like, you know, novels are where it's at. Let me focus my, you know, attention in the right way. But being able to have an idea and, you know, be done with it in a few days or a week, and you know, to have the whole complete work done in a short amount of time instead of spending 100+ days on a book is really cool. So, yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, I think for me personally, with writing short stories, it's, I right now I'm definitely more comfortable writing novel length. When because you have it's like you have space to explore certain concepts and characters and whatnot, and set the stage in a certain way, and that kind of approach, methodology, whatever, is something that I've become comfortable with. When you shorten it down to say 5 to 10,000 words, it's like, okay, a lot of the tools that I normally draw upon.
You can't fit in all the crunchy numbers that you like.
Well, not just the crunchy numbers.
And data.
But, there's certain methods that, I've become comfortable with a, novel length work have to be set aside. And certain, not exactly shortcuts, but, more efficient storytelling has to be used to, you got to get to the point really fast.
Yeah. It's a completely different exercise. It really is, and being able to sort of adjust to that different limitation is I think good for creativity, right? Because really the best creativity happens when you're given a box and told you have to stay inside it, right? Because then you have to figure out how the hell you're supposed to fit in a box that is too small, right? Exactly. And that's an interesting engineering problem, right? But it is. It is those limitations, right? We have this sort of sense that like real creativity is no limits, right? But like the real test of I think creativity is to be given those constraints, whether that's word count, right, or whatever, and or a prompt, right? Like it has to be about time travel, right? How do you solve that problem, right? And I think that is part of the fun, right? Is having those limitations and figuring out how to work with them.
Well, I think the limitations in a way engender ingenuity, because I know for me, writing short stories takes me out of my comfort zone, so I'm thinking differently, and sometimes I come up with solutions that I would never have used for a full length novel, because I have room to do the normal approaches, the normal methodology that I've kind of honed my craft to execute.
Yeah, I'm totally
for a virtual launch party tradition. Nova says hello. So for everyone who is usually coming to our parties, yes. No, usually during my parties, my camera is faced a different direction, and there's always a point where Nova opens the door because I can't close her out because she'll scream, and so she's like a regular visitor on our streams. And she was sitting under the computer just now, and she was about to get up and walking dangerously toward my power strip. So
yeah, that would have been bad.
Just rescued the stream. So anyway, Nova says hello, everybody, and Dave and Derek say hi to Nova. See, they know what to expect. So, oh, hi, Dave. I didn't see you come in, and hi, Nick. So we got a crowd. Yes. All right. Well, that leads me to my next point, which is for Jacob. Tell us about your story. I mean, I already know everything about it.
Well, so first of all, I think I want to rewind a little bit and talk about how I actually started writing, time travel to begin with. Okay, so Gordian Division series, time travel, multiverse, all sorts of fun shenanigans of that nature. And back in 2016, I think.
You're David, the time travel writer in here. I barely keep up with time as it moves forward, so don't ask me about dates.
Anyway, David suggested that we write a novel together, and he had a concept which became the Gordian Protocol, and then further on the Gordian Division series. And this is actually one of the series concepts that he had delivered to Jim Bain way back when he provided 10 different series starter concepts, one of which was Honor Harrington, and we know how that went. But there was also like Safehold in there. There were some others, and there was the kind of seed that would form the Gordian Protocol. And so he suggested that we write this book together. And what David didn't know at the time, and I didn't tell him until quite a few years later, was that I had once sworn to myself that I would never, ever, under any circumstances, write time travel. I just didn't want to deal with time travel's drama. And then David Weber, who is one of the authors who, well, there's that, but also the fact that he, inspired a lot of my early writing. Suggested that we write a time travel novel together. I'm like, yes, David, this sounds like a wonderful idea. Sign me up. So fast forward a bit, and we've had 2 novels released. We have a 3rd one on the way, coming out in October. And Christopher, you and Hank reached out to me, or to both of us, to me and David, to write a short story for Time Troopers set in the Gordian Division, not universe, multiverse.
Well, yeah, multiverse is more accurate.
And David's response was, I'd love to, but I'm really super busy, slammed right now, but I know this guy. and he can probably write a story for you. And we passed a suggestion back and forth, and everyone's like, hey, that sounds good. And then I wrote it, which became the Dr. Quiet short story. So Dr. Quiet deals with a member of the Department of Temporal Investigation for one of the 2 major superpower universes in the setting, the admin. And it follows Susan Cantrell, who is a special agent in the DTI. And she actually first appears in the Gordian Protocol, but she has a sort of blink and you miss it scene where she is then rather just blown out into space and during one of the action scenes. But she comes back because, timey-wimey stuff. In fact, a lot of the characters that we kill off in the Gordian Protocol come back.
Spoiler alert.
Well, I don't think it's a spoiler that we kill off a lot of characters. I mean, look who wrote it, okay? Yeah. Anyway.
Weber words of death.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we
destroy
whole universes in this series.
Eventually, there's going to be something known as a hollow worth of destroyed universes too, at the rate you're going.
I don't know how I feel about that. Anyway, so I was kind of thinking about, how I wanted to approach it. I knew I wanted to tell a story from a early in her career with the DTI, because she actually becomes one of the 2 primary protagonists in book 3. And one of the things that I know David is very good at is making readers cry. And I'm not David Weber. So I'm like, well, what about instead of making the reader cry, if we make the reader laugh? And so I came up with the concept with a sort of, action adventure comedy short story, which is, while it, certainly deals with, serious, stuff with Dr. Quiet, who is this terrorist. It also deals with Susan kind of struggling to find her own in the DTI and making a few boos along the way, few extra, releases of ordnance that she shouldn't have released that turn one of their capture targets into abstract art on the ceiling.
Yeah.
That sort of mistake.
Yes.
So that's kind of where Dr. Quiet came from.
All right, hold it. Nova, let me go. I gotta get my notes, Nova. Here, you hold her.
Okay.
She's all wrapped around my arm. There you go. All right. So I've got them all on my phone here. Okay, we've reached mostly the end of my questions about the anthology itself, but we've got a little bit of time left. So I'm curious to know, between the 2 of you, What is your favorite piece of time travel fiction or media overall?
I'm gonna, I think, beat you to it, Jacob, on account of your bow tie. But I was a big Doctor Who fan. It's a little more complicated now. The last, 5 years or so have not been for me. It started to go downhill at the end of Moffat's run, but there was a time, man, when I could like Hank tell you, which episode from 1972 this thing happened in. I cannot do that anymore. But I used to be a huge Doctor Who fan, and still love, especially the old stuff. And most especially the radio dramas. I went all in on those Big Finish radio dramas. They are really, I think, the best part of the entire franchise, I suppose. You're not limited by BBC television budgets when you're just doing audio, right? And so the storytelling got a lot more ambitious and a lot more long form. And of course, they've got the original actors and everything, right? Tom Baker's there. They've got Sylvester McCoy, Paul McGann, who's tremendous. But I love Doctor Who. You have a main character who reinvents himself, periodically, right? You've got anywhere in the universe at any point in time. You can kind of do whatever you want, and so you've got a central storytelling framework that allows other writers to come in and kind of do their own thing. Right? Douglas Adams, was involved with the show in the 80s, I think, or was it the late 70s? I forget, with Tom Baker towards the end of his run, right? And you get a bunch of like Paul Cornell and a bunch of other writers in to do sort of their own thing. That was one of the strengths of like early Star Trek too, right? You get like Harlan Ellison in to write some episodes and things like that, and really like let sci-fi writers do science fiction in a way that was, very visible, and so it's a tremendous vehicle to like tell all these crazy stories. Of course, the side effect of this is there's like no continuity whatsoever, right? I think there are like 4 separate stories. There's like 2 selected
internal series consistency. What is that?
Yeah, and it's time travel, right? So we're clearly just erasing our own work at some point, but like. It still like kind of lets you continue. It always gets to be new, right? Which most things don't get to run for 70 years, and it's very, it isn't run out of ideas, right? It's run into some other problems, with storytelling and things like that. But there's this huge, sort of open canvas to work with, and it's really, really cool. So,
how about you, Jacob?
All right, I am actually going to take a brief segue before I get to.
I think you're actually about to say the thing I wanted you to say. I was about to tell you to say why you wear bow ties in the first place, but is that the story?
Yes, that is the story. Okay, so Heather and I both enjoy Doctor Who, and she got me started on it, and
we've only seen New Who though. I don't think we've seen any.
We dabbled in it a little bit, but we've mostly been, what is it?
Christopher Eccleston and all.
Yeah,
basically.
and up.
Yeah, so far.
And I mean, I think definitely one of the strengths of the property is that it has that built-in mechanism to reinvent itself. That if it gets stale, it can kind of like a phoenix rise from its own ashes. So got me really into Doctor Who, and we decided to go to Dragon Con one year, cosplaying as different doctors. Mm-hmm. And I did the Matt Smith.
11th Doctor, right? Yeah.
And you did David Tennant?
Yep.
And that was actually the first time in my life I had worn a bow tie. Now, one of the things is that I've always enjoyed dressing a little more formally, but I also work in a lot of industrial environments. So like a long tie, I actually developed a phobia.
Yeah.
Because like lean over and like the scene from Roger Rabbit where his tie is stuck in the equipment, and anyway, so I stopped wearing ties, and then I discovered bow ties, and so that Christmas the family's like, okay, Jacob, what should we get you? I said bow ties. That doesn't matter. Just give me bow ties. And they're like, seriously? I'm like, no, yeah, I'm serious. And bow ties just became my thing. I really like it.
It's how people recognize you as an author now. Like you're the bow tie guy. They just look for the bow tie at conventions.
Bow ties are cool.
Yeah.
I was about to say, they're cool, right? Yeah. Oh, and you need a brand as an author, right? You've got George Martin's got his hat, right? Like everybody's got their thing.
You were saying.
So back to the actual question. So it's not Doctor Who. It is Guns of the South.
Oh, yeah.
By Harry Turtledove.
I forgot about that one.
Which, if people on listening watching aren't familiar with it, involves time travelers who go back to the American Civil War and give a whole lot of AK-47s to the South, and it follows how the timeline severely branches from its original path, and it was, I think it was the first Harry Turtledove book that I read, and I fell in love with him as an author.
You got me that for Christmas one year, I think.
I probably did.
That was one of your flirt books. Like when we were first dating, you bought me a whole bunch of books. Like, you need to read these, and that was one of them. You flirted with me with a Harry Turtledove book.
Yes, I did.
Yeah, and it worked. So I can't laugh too much. So, all right, let's see. Oh, M.A. Rothman is in. Hey.
Oh, hey, Mike.
Nice. All right. My next question, my phone keeps locking up on me. Okay. What is your favorite and least favorite thing about time travel fiction in general? Any tropes that you particularly love or hate? Oh, you look like you have things to say.
Okay, I want to go first on this one.
Yeah, you're moving.
Okay, so this isn't true for all time travel. But one of the things that bugs me about some time travel stories is that you will have the time travel, and you will have, things being changed in the past. And then you'll have the repercussions of that, and then you'll have changes on top of changes, and so on and so forth. But on almost all of them, it is never clear why these changes happen in a certain order, in a certain sequence. There's nothing within the time travel rules that are established that enforce sequence upon the time interventions, and that has always bugged me. And I think it started bugging me from the Back to the Future movies and went downhill.
I think I was going to
no, I love those movies. I will, that's just a nitpick that I have.
How about you, Christopher?
Yeah, I think I'm going to spin off that same thing. I don't like when the changes happen and there's like time to fix them, right? Like Marty's family starts to fade. Like, how does that work? Like, would they not just be gone? Like, is the movie not over just instantly, right? Which is way scarier, and I think would make for better television. Because Doc maybe would still be able to do something about it, maybe, right? But like these sort of, and Doctor Who's really bad about this too, right? Like it's like, oh, we're like in some sort of mystical space now, where like time is not, like I don't like stuff like that. Like
I let Doctor Who get away with that just because it's so fun.
It's allowed to, right? Because it, because of the things we're saying, right? Like it's this big sandbox. You let people do sort of different, divergent things with it. Doctor Who does not have consistent rules, right? Or consistent anything. Like the whole thing is in flux at all points in time. But I really hate that bit in Back to the Future with the damn fading photograph. You're like, why? Like, like it should just be done. There's that. As far as like a favorite thing, I don't really know. I do think maybe it's just like the cover of the darn book, right? You've got a knight and a samurai and a Roman, right? And like that never happened, right? And couldn't. And so being able to put you know, characters, people, cultures that would not have encountered each other under normal circumstances up against one another, or, you know, side by side, is really cool, because I'm a big you know, I'm a big history guy, and to be able to look at you know, those places and peoples and cultures, and put them in, you know, in a pot together, and say go, is really cool. So that's probably it's a very general answer, but being able to play with history like that, because the past episodes of Doctor Who are better than the like random out in space ones, just invariable, right? Like I would much rather, you know, go visit Napoleon or Lord Byron than like make up a slime monster. You know, if I'm given a choice here, you know, if they, you know, if I'm given an episode, I'd rather do something like that. And so that's one of the cool things, I think, is to be able to mess with history, you know, and in new and interesting ways, you know, like Comes of the South, right? You're able to, you know, explore these sort of sometimes horrible, you know, counterfactuals, right? But to do that in like really off the wall ways, where, you know, you've got an AK in 1864 or whatever, right? You know, so that sort of stuff's just fun, right? You know, as a geek, right? Just to be able to mess with that sort of stuff.
The cover brings up another good question. Did you have any input on the cover? Because that thing is awesome. That's one of my favorite book covers ever.
I did, actually, which, you know, if Tony's watching, it's not usually the case. But she let me, well, a couple of these last ones actually, you know, have a bit of say. This is Kieran Yanner did this. And he is my cover artist on the Sun Eater books, and he sort of got brought into Bane's general rotation, and he's awesome. I really like his work generally, but because I'd worked with him for so many years, Tony was like, "You just, you know, talk to him." And you know, I kind of took point on this one, which was fun. You know, because all I had to say was, she was like, "What are you thinking?" I'm like, "I want to put, you know, a sci-fi, you know, future soldier with a bunch of dudes from the past, right?" She's like, "Perfect, we're done. You know, print it." And so, you know, I talked to Kieran, and he's great because he's like, "Which Roman helmet do you want, Gallic H or Gallic G?" And I'm like, "I am so glad that we can have these conversations." Although is left-handed, which that would not be allowed, but we'll let it slide for composition. But you know, so that was fun. You know, usually, you know, I like with this next one I've got, we had the art already. We had an old Bob Eggleton painting. We're like, what should we do with this? Christopher, think about a topic that would fit this art that we have lying around. And so, it was, you know, I had to think up a whole anthology concept, you know, in reverse. You know, we had the cover first. So it's always a little bit different. But this one was top down, and I actually got to you know, got to talk to Kieran and figure out what we wanted. And I think it's slick. I think this is my favorite cover of all of the anthologies we've done. Really, just awesome cover.
We've been doing a convention today, and we've got the second day of it tomorrow. But Time Troopers was literally the first book we sold today, like right when it opened. And I think it was pretty much because of the cover. Like someone saw it and was like, "Ooh, need it." Kind of thing.
Yeah, Kieran's the man, Joe.
Oh yeah. All right.
Yeah.
We are beginning to come to a close, and I have one more question for you guys. But before I say that, I just want to say to everyone watching, there's still the contest you can enter. And again, to enter, just look in the description and click the form and go fill it out. You know, I'll actually put the form. Give me a second, and I'll put it in the comments so it's easier to access. It's a little Google form. All right, just fill it out. I will draw a random winner after this is all closed up, and we will send you a signed copy of Time Troopers. Or if you're entering contests too, just put in the if you already own Time Troopers, just put in your confirmation number or whatever proving that you bought it, and you'll be entered to win a copy of the Gordian Protocol, also signed. So yes. So my final question for you guys, relating to time travel, if you could travel back to any one event or period, what would it be? Is this a tough one? I know mine, and it's totally stupid. Like, if I get the ability to time travel, I'm going to use it for something really stupid. But I want to go back and see Star Wars on the day it opened. Like, I know it's going to be completely mundane, but that's my stupid time travel thing
right.
that I would go do.
I actually have a rather mundane thing, but it's a personal thing.
Mm-hmm.
I would go back in time and tell myself not to injure myself so that I didn't have to suffer the last 2 years with chronic nerve pain.
That really is mundane, but I totally get it.
Which I'm recovering from, thanks to the surgery I had last year. But those were 2 miserable years.
You got to give a fun one too. As the
Okay.
moderator, I
All right.
say it is
Christopher,
the
you go. I'll think of my fun one.
Okay. I'll do the normal, like, actually going back in time answer here. And I would like to go and see Constantinople in the reign of Justinian. I just think it would be a neat place to go. I'm a big sort of late Roman, early Byzantine history guy, and Justinian is my guy. So I think it'd be a really interesting. I'll skip the Nika revolts. I don't need any chariot hooligans. But I would like to see the city in its prime, and I think that would be really cool. Although I could be persuaded in sort of the Star Wars vein to go pick up a Dio concert in the 80s at some point, because I never got to see him. So, I'll stop there on my way back to the 6th century. So.
I want to add that if any of our viewers are also interested in Constantinople in the age of Justinian, you should totally read the Valkyrie Protocol, because it's some alternate history, but it factors in.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, actually, that part of Valkyrie Protocol.
That was a David section.
Well, there was like, the first draft version, and I actually did the first draft version of those scenes, and I had thought that David was going to go through them and expand them, and he was actually, when he looked over the first draft, he was actually pretty sick.
Was that right after his Dragon Con fall where he hit his head?
A lot of these things, they sort of just blur together.
The Webbers have adventures.
But so it got turned into Tony Weisskopf, and one of the pieces of feedback was more meat on the history. And like, David, this is all you. I'm the engineer. You are the historian. Take it. I'll handle these other issues that Tony has flagged. You've got this one. And I think he, the next time that I saw the manuscript, there was essentially a novella of new material in it. And so David did as David does. And it's quite spectacular, I think. Really enriches the novel, which is, exactly what the feedback from the content edits were. So the fun thing.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. So one of the things that got me into engineering in the first place was a love of airplanes. And I had initially thought that I wanted to be like an aerospace engineer, and eventually that in college went to electrical engineering, which is a field that I love also. But I had this love of aircraft when I was growing up. And there was one very famous engineer, Clarence L. Johnson, I think his name was. And this guy, it was just, if you look at the planes that he was involved in, all of them look like nothing else from that period. Because and like, one of the most famous is the SR-71 Blackbird. But he also made the U-2, which is, another spy plane, but it's like the complete opposite in terms of design philosophy. In fact, I think the only quote unquote failure was like the Pogo plane.
That sounds fun.
It was a very early attempt at vertical takeoff and landing, and it took the vertical aspect a little too seriously.
That's a great name.
but
is that the literal official name?
no,
of that
no,
play?
I don't remember.
Oh,
I don't remember what it was, but
it should have been.
But there was that. I would love to like sit down with him and just pick his brain. And so that would be my fun time travel thing, is to go back and to talk to him.
That's actually kind of cool. Yay. All right. Well, we are exactly at an hour. So thank you everyone for joining us and watching. Thank you, Christopher, for joining us and putting together this anthology in the first place, because
Yeah, for having me.
So
Time Troopers, check it out.
Yeah, Time Troopers, you can find it in all awesome bookstores. You can find it online. You can find it at Bain.com. Please buy it and review it and tell us how much you love it. If you don't love it, just be quiet. Christopher, where can everyone find your books in addition to the anthologies?
So my books are available. Yeah, wherever books are sold. My website is solanempire.com, SOLAN empire.com, and I am on YouTube as well over at Sun Eater Books. So if you want to come, subscribe to the channel, do this sort of thing too all the time, live streaming and talking to readers and putting out stuff related to the books. So, come on by.
All right. And again, everyone watching, you still have time to enter our contest, so go do that fast. And thank you again, and bye.
Bye, everyone.
Let me click the end button. All right, we are officially done.